So a farmer who grows hemp is for fiber, or who grows cotton or raises sheep for wool, is most likely also growing or raising other types of crops that are for the food industry. And cotton, for example, has cotton seeds, which become cottonseed oil or cottonseed meal. Cottonseed meal is eaten, organic cottonseed meal is then eaten by organic dairy farms to make organic milk or organic cheese or organic meat.
Hey guys, it's Mandy with Global Hemp Association. I wanted to say thank you so much for joining. I'm excited about the opportunity to build a relationship and connect this supply chain. I mean, after all, that's why we started the association. Our association was built on the foundation of connecting supply chain, building relationships, and helping you grow your business. Anyone from farmers, manufacturers, and distributors, people that are passionate about the supply chain, and those creating products selling into biofuels, plastics, textiles, construction, and building materials.
I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you very, very much. I want to give a quick shout out to all of our sponsors at Global Hemp Association. Global Hemp Association could not do what we're doing or continue to share content, create the events that we do without our sponsors. So thank you so much to First Citizens Bank, who is our new sponsor that just came on. We're really excited to have them. They've got great banking services, and I'd love to connect you with Joe, who is also a new board member for Global Hemp Association. So I just want to real quick give a shout out, and also remind you, if you're catching the interview later and it's off of our YouTube channel or on a podcast, Lori is going to be sharing her contact info. And so just so that you guys can get in touch and have a further discussion, the goal and why we do this really is to help build relationships and share content across different platforms. And so, Lori, I'm really excited to have you on. We talk a lot about standards. The topic around organic comes up all the time, especially as brands are involved. And so I'm really excited to share who you are and what you're doing for the industry, especially in textiles. So before I start talking too much, you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got into this position? And thank you for joining.
Thank you, Mandy. I have to say, I often feel that I was gifted this amazing job, which certain aspects of my life came together, a confluence of circumstances. I was always an organic gardener. I started in the 70s. When I was about 15, 16, 17, I read Organic Gardening magazine, and I always gardened organically and got into organic food early on. And I'm a real back to the land hippie, live on a small 13-acre farm right now here in Western Massachusetts. So I'm very much an organic person. I also have a certain amount of love of textiles. I got my degree in fine arts, and I worked in a costume shop and the theater, and very involved in drafting patterns and knitting and all kinds of textile things. I became an organic inspector for food in the 90s. I took the first GOTS training in 2004 or 2005. And I was one of the few GOTS inspectors for many years. There was a guy named Fred on the West Coast and me on the East Coast, and we were doing all of the GOTS inspections in the US for a few years. I worked as a staff inspector for Control Union for 8 years. I was an independent inspector for about the same amount of time before and after that. And then in 2016, I started this role as the North American GOTS representative. We have 8 representatives around the world. So I have colleagues in China, Nigeria, England, and all around the world. And I get to be the one here in North America. So this is my role. Yeah. So I feel like it was made for me, my job.
Yeah, those who may be listening and don't know, what is GOTS? What does GOTS stand for? And can you talk a little bit about, I didn't realize the level of support that there is around the organic sector, right? And what does that mean for brands and for farmers, or the supply chain itself, as you see industry really shifting, or this paradigm shifting?
Yeah. Well, part of my role has been to educate people to the fact that natural fiber clothing is actually made from an item that began on a farm. Yes. So a farmer who grows hemp is for fiber, or who grows cotton or raises sheep for wool,
Yeah.
is most likely also growing or raising other types of crops that are for the food industry. And cotton, for example, has cotton seeds, which become cottonseed oil or cottonseed meal. Cottonseed meal is eaten, organic cottonseed meal is then eaten by organic dairy farms to make organic milk or organic cheese or organic meat. So it's very much tied into farming and other in the food world. So the textile world is, similar, because you have varieties of hemp that are for supplements, varieties of hemp that are for cereal, and varieties of hemp that are for textiles. So
Yeah.
it's a similar thing with breeds of sheep. It's a similar thing with other fibers made from
circular economy, right? And it just goes to show the impact of like growing hemp for, say, CBD flower did not only impact CBD flower, for example. It's this huge sector for the fiber and grain industry. If we're growing for grain, we've got fiber no matter what. And so, yes.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the support around the global and national support around the organic sector.
Yeah, well, I guess I could start. I do have a presentation, and I will share my screen, and we can see what we will see here.
Yeah.
So yeah, this photo is from the we have a Say No to Greenwashing campaign that's going on right now, and these we actually took videos of workers in facilities all around the world. And they're really fun and really interesting, and we're getting really positive feedback about it.
Can I share something? Can I share something really quick? I've said this a few times, and I'm embarrassed every time. I was just so disconnected to the amount of people and hands that touch our garments as they're being made. And I got an opportunity in Thailand for 2 weeks to explore the silk factories and the different textile factories. And it was the most humbling, like rewarding experience I've ever had, just to the reality of what clothes mean and the reality of like when we're spending small dollars, the impact that makes or doesn't make, or what they're losing because of those. The transaction is just not, it does not equate to the amount of manpower it takes. Like it's just amazing. So
it is humbling. I agree. That's how I felt. I was in India last month, and I was in a facility, and the pride that people take. I actually worked in a costume. I worked in a sewing facility. I was a pocket setter for about 6 months at a kind of a low point in my life, I have to say. It was such hard work, and it was summertime. There was no air conditioning, and I was sewing wool men's suits. Putting pockets into wool men's suits. And I have every sympathy and understanding for how much work goes in to sewing garments.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of people that say everybody should work in fast food. I think now, like, everybody should understand the textile industry and the supply chain and the impact. So I just want to give credit. I highly appreciate what you're doing. And
good. Well, we can kind of chat over my presentation. I just find it helpful to have some visuals and some numbers and figures and that kind of thing. So GOTS is the Global Organic Textile Standard. We are a textile processing standard. So we begin at the first stage of processing for any textile. It can be hemp, cotton, wool, silk, etc. And these are some of the organizations that recognize and work with us and endorse us. And we have 4 founding organizations that started GOTS in 2002, and that's IVN in Germany, the Soil Association in the UK, Organic Trade Association here in the US, and JOCA, the Japanese Organic Cotton Association. And those groups, organizations, actually form our advisory council and our standards committee. And we update our standard every few years, and we've just released version 7.0, and that will go into full effect within a year. And so those are the comments that people submitted, industries submitted, were all taken into account by our standards committee and were agreed upon. We also have a certifiers council, and the certifiers mean certification bodies. And the certification bodies around the world are actually the ones who conduct the audits. It's not GOTS itself conducting our own audits, hence third-party verification. So GOTS is actually a traceable standard. I'll get into all the traceability when I show the transaction certificates and that kind of thing. GOTS has been growing exponentially. It's really been amazing. And I just realized that this is hiding some numbers. So I just moved us over a little bit. And at least on my screen, the pandemic was actually helpful to GOTS. I think the home goods sector really benefited by this sad situation of the pandemic. People were home, stuck at home. They were feeling sick, they were feeling unhealthy, or they were afraid of being unhealthy. People were looking at pollution. People were looking at what are we doing to our environment? What are we eating? You know, and I know when a lot of the factories that weren't running enabled people to see stars for the first time in cities where they normally don't see the stars. And so we had a nice bump in especially the home goods area during the pandemic. That was a little silver lining there. And come on, go to the next. Why is it not going to the next?
I always say that this pandemic really shed light on supply chain and awareness of supply chain. Where are clothes coming from? Where are they going? What's the impact? It's been a blessing to open up opportunities in different sectors for sure.
Well, so as you can see from this chart, North America is only 2% of the GOTS certified facilities because, well, you know, when NAFTA happened, the whole textile industry left the United States. And there's a lot of wonderful innovation going on right now, especially in the Carolinas and American South is really working, and some in LA too. There's definitely some industries that are trying to invigorate the Made in the United States. There's a lot of initiatives to support local fibers. There's the American grown cotton. And of course, hemp is being grown here. And there's a wonderful flax project that I know people in the Pacific Northwest that's happening. Mm-hmm. So if we can start getting spinning happening again, we do have spinning in Mexico happening. So it is possible to have a completely North American GOTS certified product at this point in time. So these are the figures for that. And then we've got the 4 parts of GOTS. So GOTS is organic fibers. We require that any incoming fiber at the first processing step that comes in have been grown or raised on an organic farm. Just as with food. Certified. So those are not certified to GOTS at the farm level. The cotton
certified. Is a USDA certified organic required?
It is. It is USDA NOP, which is the National Organic Program. So these are the same auditors often who are the ones that are doing organic food audits as well. I did those for a number of years, those inspections. And so we guarantee the organic traceability throughout the whole supply chain. It's third-party certified, as I had mentioned. We have ecological and social criteria, so there's no need for a separate fair trade label. You will find GOTS clothing that has a separate fair trade label. Some brands feel like the consumer wants to see it, or they feel that they just want to have those programs. But that's actually not necessary because we are already a social compliance audit as well. And of course, every processing step. So when the consumer purchases the product, they know that every step in the supply chain met all of these criteria. And so we have label grade, similar to organic food label grade. So organic itself means 95 to 100%. Organic. And then there's 5% of allowable materials. That could be a little spandex, that could be a little natural fiber that's allowed, that we have an allowable list. Then we have the made with organic label. Made with organic means it was 70% organic material, and we do not allow a mixing of organic and conventional in the same product. So you would not see a shirt that is 70% organic hemp and 30% conventional hemp. It could be 70% organic hemp and 30% organic cotton, for example, or wool, something else. Another percentage that can work is 70% organic cotton and 30% conventional hemp is allowed, because there's not a lot of organic hemp available yet. And so we do allow for hemp is one of our natural fibers that we allow in a percentage to be blended with organic cotton.
Oh, so that's a big thing that we as the hemp industry really need to pay attention to, and these manufacturers for brands. I mean,
that's right. That's right. Because also there's a shortage of organic cotton because so many consumers love organic cotton products, especially baby clothes. Bedding. People love organic cotton. They want organic cotton. And sometimes there's a shortage because the demand is so high. So a nice way to deal with that for brands is to incorporate hemp, natural hemp, into that product, and they can use the 70% category of 70% organic cotton, 30% hemp, for example.
Okay, so I want to come back to the brands and what this looks like. So I'll let you finish. And then
okay. Yeah, I'll get through this. And again, we have social criteria. We are as strict as any other fair trade standard. And then for ecological criteria, we have a very strict list of allowable inputs. We have a water monitoring tool. And actually, I have several slides about how we exercise control for hazardous chemicals. We have an approval program. We have 2 directories on our website. One's a directory of GOTS suppliers. The other directory is GOTS inputs, GOTS approved inputs. So those are dyes, finishes, et cetera. Those companies also have audits, and they also are subjected to our social criteria and our environmental criteria. And again, this explains it. And this is great that I'm sharing this because people can look at this after and look at our slides. And there's a lot of information here. We don't allow animal testing, for example. So we have 23,000 trade names listed on our approval GOTS list. And, you can see wastewater treatment, as I mentioned.
I have a question that might sound kind of foolish. When you say 23,000 companies listed on the trade, what does that mean? Is it?
Yeah, so it's not 23,000 separate companies. It's 23,000 allowable chemicals.
Products. Okay, I got
products. You. And so one company may have 20 products.
I got you.
So those products we've deemed eligible for GOTS to be authorized for use in GOTS products. And even for non-GOTS, there are conventional companies that make conventional products, but they choose to use GOTS dyestuffs, and they're allowed to mention that in their promotion.
Okay.
And then, of course, very restrictive list. Again, aligning with some other programs. And now this is about social criteria, which aligns with these programs, the OECD, ILO, the United Nations Human Rights programs. Of course, we don't allow any of this child labor, et cetera, sexual harassment, safe working conditions. When I used to inspect factories, I would always use the restroom that the workers use, not the one up by the office, the fancy one. I wanted to make sure the workers had a good restroom. I'd go in the lunchroom, chat with workers, interview people without their manager around, see if people report anything to me that would not be allowed in our standard. If that something is reported, it would become a nonconformity and it would have to be addressed before they would be allowed to achieve GOTS certification. So again, here's all the processing steps. We have our icons for each of them. A lot of people don't realize that traders need to be certified if they're taking ownership, buying and selling in a large quantities of products, because they're warehousing, and their warehouses may even be a site that's not meeting our social criteria, for example, or maybe they're fumigating in the warehouse and they're doing something that would not be allowed in our GOTS program. So that is part of our supply chain, is trading as well. Again, third-party inspection, traceability. We look at, so we have two types of certificates. This is a source of confusion for a lot of people. You have a scope certificate and a transaction certificate. The scope certificate belongs to that entity, say a weaver. This weaver has had an audit, they've passed, they're certified to weave yarn. So they have that diploma in a sense, and they hang it on the wall. This is who they are, what they're authorized to do. If you look in the GOTS directory on our website, you're going to see a suppliers list. You're looking for a weaver, you put in a country, you put in Portugal, all the GOTS certified weavers in Portugal are going to come up. That's a scope certificate. Transaction certificate, trans meaning movement, like transportation. The transaction certificate moves with the goods. So for example, I'm that weaver and I want to send my rolls of fabric is going to go to a cut and sew facility, and I need a transaction certificate for that cut and sew facility to have. I can make a bill of lading. We can do our purchase order, but I cannot create my own transaction certificate. I have to apply every time. I just log into a portal. I go to my certifier. I say, I have this quantity. I want to ship it to that place. And the certifier takes a good look at it and makes sure that it makes sense based on what they know about this weaver. The certifier could look at it and say, wait a minute, you did not purchase enough yarn to possibly make that amount of GOTS certified fabric. Something's wrong here. The certifier is always working to prevent fraud at every supply chain step. So only the certifier can issue that transaction certificate. So when the transaction certificate goes to the cut and sew facility, they've got that TC in their hand saying, well, now we know this is the amount of goods we have legally, and this has been vetted as a GOTS product.
Okay, so I'm taken back by the amount of fraud that happens in the supply chain, especially in the textile industry. Can you speak a little bit to like what brought these standards on, or what are some things that consumers that may be unaware, like I am, right? Like what don't we know that happens in the textile industry that creates the needs for these standards?
Well, yeah, we definitely need third-party verification. I mean, when you've got a good thing going, people want to rip you off. Oh, people want to copy it. Oh, you want organic? I'll put a stamp on it. We'll make it organic and try to sell it, you know. Oh, I'm going to sell it on some platform on the internet. And I'm just going to call it organic because then I can charge more. You know, people want to do this, and we catch them. And we catch them and they get in trouble, and we sue them and we win. And we don't want to be in the business of doing that.
Right.
We want to be in the business of healthy life and taking care of the planet, and being able to have fabulous clothing that's healthy for all of us. We do not want to be in the business of spending all of our time on fraud, but we all have to spend a lot of time on fraud because there are bad actors out there. It's like you wouldn't need traffic cops if everybody drove the speed limit. You know, it's the way of the world. When the weed situation happened in China just about a year and a half ago, as soon as we discovered this situation that was happening with some organic cotton workers, we added to our transaction certificates not only country of origin, but region of origin.
Awesome.
So a state, a province, or however the region is determined is added to every transaction certificate. So even at this weaver level, say I'm this weaver, I'm the weaver for the day here. Yeah. I'm a weaver, and my transaction certificate that I got from the yarn supplier gives not only the country of origin, but the region of origin. So if it's from China, it'll tell me if it's not from Zhejiang province, it's from somewhere else. Well, first of all, you can't even import anything in the United States from Zhejiang province. It's been banned over a year ago. But if I'm anywhere in the world, I can verify where the raw fiber came from, because at every supply chain step, those certifiers add that. We also have, we allow for other add-on programs. So if you're ROC certified, you want organic plus regenerative, or you want to add some other fair trade standard that you have at your farm, or anything like that, you can add those standards, and the certifier at every supply chain step can add those boxes as well, so that a brand owner who wants to tell their story, we have a vertical operation, or even if they don't have a vertically integrated operation, even if they want to they know that every step in the supply chain is following these certain add-on programs, that can be validated throughout the whole supply chain through the transaction certificates.
Okay, so brands, more and more we talk about what consumers are looking for. Where are brands really? I saw you guys have got a lot of international support, and really our textile industry is so international, like we saw in your numbers.
Mm-hmm.
It is so small here. What are brands looking at? Where are they positioning, in the next few years, especially as we see the awareness and the education growing to the importance of the regenerative or organic practices?
Well, I think smart brands are waking up to the fact that they need to listen to their consumers. And consumers are becoming increasingly more educated and care about the products that they're buying and how they're voting with their dollars.
Yeah.
And same thing happened with organic food 20 years ago, when consumers wanted to make sure they could go into a store and buy a can of soup or a box of cereal, and that if it said organic on it, that it actually was organic.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening. I've had brand owners tell me when I meet with them, they'll say to me, we used to try to get away without being GOTS certified. We would say, oh, this is organic and that is organic. And then we'd get emails from customers, and the customers would say, how do I know this is organic? Where's the proof? And is this grown organically? Is this made organically? Is this processed organically? What do you mean when you say organic? And so this is a groundswell of educated consumers having a customer demand for a certain standard, which is really exciting to see. And I think we're going to see more of that.
What challenges do you see coming, or what challenges have you really, both what we've seen and what maybe you've been able to overcome? For me, one is the traceability. Like, traceability is a huge piece in textiles because so many hands touch it, as well as like organic cotton a lot of times looks like conventional cotton. And so how do we reassure?
Yeah, well, we have a global trace-based system that that has been in development for well over a year, and hopefully be released by the end of this year. And it's actually, it's all in real time, exactly where the cotton is and at what stage it's at. And so this is a very comprehensive, I had some slides about it, but I took them out for today, but I do have information about that if anyone's interested. And it's also, in terms of challenge, I think, the biggest challenge of all is that there's still too much pollution going on in our world, and we're not keeping up with mitigating climate change as fast as we need to be. I mean, that's our biggest challenge for everything. And that's why GOTS is so important for taking care of all these different aspects of climate. So the challenges are, I think we're trying to make it easy for consumers, because they can go to the GOTS supplier database and look up companies, or they can look at, when you're standing in a store and you look at a product, or you're online, if you see the GOTS logo and it's got the GOTS license number right on it, that you're all set there. You have nothing to worry about. So yeah, I have a collection of false GOTS logos that companies have made up, like they just look a little like a GOTS logo, but they're shaped like a cotton bowl and all kinds of things. Yeah, they're out there. We just have to be vigilant.
Just crazy to me. And it's the reality of where you're at, right? When you're trying to change practices and change industry and really it's part of this paradigm shift. We're getting away from greed. And like you said, our consumers are willing to vote with their dollar, right? They care about what that traceability looks like. And so future, what do you anticipate for future thing? Like where are you as an organization really looking to focus over the next couple of years?
Yeah, well, I think looking at a lot of different kinds of fibers, and I think this hemp, your association is so important because definitely hemp is such a great crop. First of all, it can be grown organically so easily.
Yeah.
It grows in, I think, every state in the US. It can be grown. It could be grown in Canada, it can grow in Mexico, it can grow all these climates. I know some people who are involved in hemp who are making not just the rough kind of like linen stuff, but they're making soft jersey knits. They're making all kinds of, they need to have these processes approved by GOTS. They need to have they're working on grading systems for hemp in the same way that we have grades for cotton, the USDA grades. If you go to a cotton gin and then you go to the USDA office where they look at the color, the quality, the staple length, et cetera, how clean the cotton is. Well, the same things are taking place now for hemp. And so this is a kind of a very old fiber, and also in a way, a very young fiber. And so it's young in this new paradigm of standard setting. And so I think the blending of hemp is really important. And the blending of cotton with other fibers too is very exciting. And a lot of really great animal work going on. I mean, even people who are vegan can appreciate textile, sheep grown for textiles that are they're taken care of so well. These sheep are not killed for meat or anything. They feel good when they get they get shorn. And so and it's also it's wonderful to use those kind of animals for grazing. It helps with carbon sequestration. It helps with using fewer fossil fuels for mowing purposes. So Angora goats, sheep, those kinds of animals are very integral to a very holistic farming system, and for compost, et cetera. So I think there's some really exciting and very holistic farming practices that I see going on and going into the future.
Okay, well, I'm excited to hear you even toss out the discussion around carbon, because it's something that comes up a lot because of the biomass, the rate at which hemp grows and its ability to, grow with less water and, all the buzzwords, right? There's still a lot of research to what's growing where and what's best and practices, but I think it plays a big role, and it's interesting to see on a global scale, less in the US, right? But definitely on a global scale, the importance of that carbon neutral, supply chain. Yes,
for sure. So again, here's all the supply chain steps, and there's the transaction certificates, which go from first processing to spinning, et cetera. At that first processing stage, so for example, a decortication for hemp or at the gin for cotton, they're going to receive a USDA NOP certificate, a scope certificate and a transaction certificate from the farmer. And then from each step after, they're going to have a GOTS transaction certificate all the way up. So it's just fun to see the pictures. I did keep this in about our central database system. We call it Global Trace Base.
Awesome.
So this is real exciting, and it's having volume reconciliation in it. So
that you have some checks and balances to what people are purchasing, to what people are. That's great. I mean, that right there kind of speaks to that question I had, right? Of if I go out and buy a bale of organic cotton and a bale of non-organic cotton, and I take them back into my warehouse, now I have 2 bales of organic cotton.
Yes, right? And also if you do you can do lab testing to make sure they're organic, but yes. And it reduces fraud, of course, as we were talking about. And I just want to zip through these slides. This is more about that. So this is our water monitoring tool that we have. Of course, every wet processing facility is required to have a water treatment facility. Either they have their own water treatment facility, or some are in industrial parks where they share a water treatment facility. That's required all over the world. And oh, good, we're at the end. GOTS is the only textile standard that, no, I mean of this. I'm happy to keep talking with you, Mandy. I was just meaning, I meant that we could stop looking at slides and I'll stop sharing my screen. But we meet all 17 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So I'm very proud of that. We address every one of them. So that's quite interesting. So
and again, it goes back to what we're seeing on a global scale, right? I feel like the US is a little far behind on some of these global goals.
Well, we're behind in some ways and not in others. We do have an EPA, and there's not an EPA in every country. We do have some labor laws that are weak and some labor laws that are strong. And some states have much better labor laws than others.
Very fair. I actually really appreciate you bringing these up, right? Because I was looking at it from a perspective of adoption of the carbon neutral or the sustainability goals, right? But you're right, we do have infrastructure that other countries have not. And so, yeah, I appreciate that.
The COP27 summit was very influential, and a lot has come out of that. In fact, GOTS was recognized by the Department of State in the US as a preferred standard for purchasing for procurement for government fabrics because of our low carbon footprint. And so that means for military or for other federal purchasing, they have to, just in the same way that they help support US made products. In fact, if it wasn't for the military, I don't know if the US would have even had much of a textile industry at all, because the military does prefer to buy US made products. So that's kept the wheels turning in the Carolinas and in some, a lot of textile areas in the US. And again, this administration has made a lot of effort to mitigate climate change and has come out of that summit with some proposals, and some of them mention GOTS as a preferred certification for that reason, for mitigating climate change.
Good news. Yeah, like I said, I look at it at consumers, and still even from this level, if I'm talking to the general public, people are like, climate change, what's that? That's not a thing. It's not going to affect us. It's just like, we don't get it. Like, we are so disconnected, or people are disconnected. And so I appreciate what you're doing. And it's exciting to me to see the connection from the brands and consumers in awareness around GOTS certifications and around the importance of the traceability and what it means, like you said, to all 17 of the United Nations goals, sustainability.
Yeah. I'm very proud to work for GOTS.
Yeah. How do people get involved? If somebody's on any piece of this supply chain, how do they get involved? How do they join? And can you talk a little bit about what cost is if either manufacturer or brand wants to, become GOTS certified?
Well, there's nothing to join. We are in a club. We're a standard. We're a nonprofit standard. We're not some kind of club you can join or an association that you can join where there's no money to be involved. To be involved would mean a few things. One would be you can decide to purchase GOTS products. Like next time you need a shower curtain, I have a nice GOTS certified shower curtain that's beautiful, that's hanging in my bathroom right now. I mean, you could be involved in that way. You can be certified. We have a whole host of certification bodies that conduct audits. And I have a list I'd be happy to send to anyone who's considering certification. I cannot recommend, and I would not recommend one over another.
Yeah.
They are, some will say, oh, we can get to you in 6 months. Some will say, oh, we can have you up and certified probably within a month. So it depends on how busy they are. They may offer you different fees. That has nothing to do with GOTS. We develop our standard, we upgrade our standard, And we do authorize them to conduct the audits. We give them some trainings, but they do not work for us. We don't work with them. They're not part of GOTS itself. That's why it's completely third-party verification.
Okay, so I'd like to dive in sometime to the standards, and I don't feel like I know them as well, but there's obviously a lot of questions that come up, and ASTM is very involved in a lot of the meetings, right, around developing standards for, say, a textile grade fiber, right? As how do you measure the diameter and the width and the tensile strength, and what does that look like? You had mentioned earlier that there were a few groups that were working on developing some of those. How do we connect those? How do we?
So we have different levels of certifiers. So level 4 certifiers are the only ones that have laboratories themselves and conduct and do analysis, GMO testing, etc. So the level 4 certifiers would be the ones that would approve of a process of processing. So if there's an enzyme technology that you're using, if there's a chemical closed loop system technology that you're using, anything like that, you would, and if it's innovative and new, you would apply to one of the level 4 certifiers to have that process approved, and then it becomes part of the GOTS standard.
Okay.
And then any products going through that process would then be allowed to be GOTS certified once that's approved.
What's a process look like if you're a lab and you want to become a certifier?
Well, some certifiers do have labs. I know when I worked at Control Union, there was a lab in Rotterdam, was their main lab. They had another lab at their office in India, and even the Control Union in New Orleans has a lab, but that wasn't for textiles, but it was for some of the other standards that they do. They had a small lab.
Yeah.
So some CBs do have labs. Others contract with laboratories that they trust and work with. So when an auditor goes out and takes a sample, say I take a cutting of a piece of fabric with rubber gloves on, put it in a plastic bag, it gets sent, and maybe it will be run for any toxic chemicals to make sure that they are actually following GOTS rules. Every year I have to go on a little shopping spree, and I go to, unfortunately, I'm able to get in nearby Northampton, Mass. I'm able to buy organic clothing. I happen to live at a very educated community where it's available to me to go buy GOTS clothing and products and my food co-op, etc. And I have to mail them to India to my colleague Prachi, who runs our whole quality control program for GOTS, and she sends it to a lab, and they analyze and make sure that none of our GOTS certified companies that I've purchased from are violating any of our rules.
Cutting corners. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That gets tested for sure.
That's awesome. So you get to be like a secret shopper. I want that. I do, but I don't, right? Because I'm sure it's pretty discouraging also when you find something that you're like,
yeah, that would be, yeah.
For sure. Okay, so I want to wrap this up and be respectful of your time, but I do have a couple things. I was reading your bio, and you've had an opportunity, you'd mentioned earlier, to tour a ton of different facilities. Can you talk a little bit about what you find and what you see, some of the rewarding moments, as well as maybe some that have troubled or, maybe help to put some of this, standard development really on a fast track if you find things that, need to be elevated, need to change?
Well, I have had the opportunity to, I've worked in every state but 4, every province in Canada. I've worked in at least a dozen countries. I was in India last month. That was my 28th country, although I know people who've been to 70 or more, so I can't really, but it's not a contest. It's like work, but some of it's pleasure. I have seen some amazing things. I think the pride that people have in quality and crafts, I've noticed at when I have visited a factory, and I remember one factory where there were all these bicycles there that people used to bike to work, and then there were all these little motorbikes
Mhm.
And the person I was walking around with said to me, see those bikes there? And this was in South America. I won't say the name of the company. And he said, see those bikes? Those bikes are from the workers who just started working here. See all those motorbikes? Those are from people who've worked here for a few months. They've now got motorbikes. And they had in the cafeteria, they had this fabulous lunch that was made. It was like your school lunch as a kid. You walk in, it smells really good. I ate lunch there with everybody. They had a burrito table, all kinds of stuff. You could build your own burrito stuff. And they had a big meal, and people were taking stuff in bags home. People were paid at least double what the average worker in that area would get. There's a waiting list of people who want to work at these facilities.
So cool. Because the people
So,
matter. The
people matter, and to know that they're working in safe working conditions, they're being treated with respect, they have the right to form unions, they have rights, and there's we don't allow sexual abuse, or we even have a wage gap analysis, the highest paid versus lowest paid worker. So we're and it's safe. They're not working with dangerous chemicals that could be washed out later on, and some kind of claim could be made later on, oh, this is a clean product, because everything bad has already been washed out. That's not the way to go. We're clean along the whole supply chain.
Yes. Well, and again, it's this disconnect. And I know I'm not the only one that is so disconnected from not just where our clothing comes from, but our food, right? And what goes into our food and how it's taken care of. And
Yeah.
you had talked a little bit earlier about the relation between the textile industry and the food industry, right? I just love Karen Wilcox isn't on my team, and I just love her and her knowledge, especially from the Organic Trade Association, and her passion in the hemp industry.
Yeah.
What do you see as opportunities, over the next few years for this increased awareness, or the growth of the organic sector? Right. I mean, it's something that comes up. We get a lot of conversations from farmers that are really reserved because of the cost to them, and the lack of solutions they have to mitigate disease
Well, the new Farm Bill has an increased amount in the budget for the National Organic Program, and OTA, Organic Trade Association, has done a wonderful job in lobbying for this and working toward this. And recently, the Federal Trade Commission decided to update the green guides, which were several years old. And I worked with other people at GOTS to submit comments for that. OTA submitted comments for that. And so the new green guides will also be making it clear what legally you can and cannot say about organic products, and to stop greenwashing. And that's another way to stop greenwashing, is when you get government offices declaring this. The USDA promotes GOTS. The NOP says we prefer GOTS as a claim, because GOTS is a processing standard as well as organic traceability from the farm level. So we have an endorsement from the National Organic Program.
Well,
and
it's
that's
just,
what we want to see.
You don't see the processing standard as often, right? We get a lot of like pieces or the end product. What does that spec look like? Or what's the measurement going to look like to get that final spec? But how we're reaching that is really of interest. I'd actually love to talk with you offline. I know you are so busy, so I don't want to make this ask, but something we hear in our industry all the time is, or that's starting to develop along the hemp industry, right, is we may understand what the spec needs. Now, how do each of these processors at smaller scale meet that spec? And that conversation of how, and I have a feeling that a lot of your processes and your systems probably would help our industry a lot, help to develop the hemp industry to meet that larger demand, or our ability to blend at bigger scale. What's your opinion there, and what's your feedback?
Well, first of all, OTA has a fiber council. They have certain councils. They have a retailer council. They have a health and beauty aid council. They have a fiber council, and we do meet quarterly, and we do some really fun events where we promote organic together. So sometimes at like Expo West outside in Anaheim and some other places where we've had pavilions with GOTS certified clothing and bedding all together. And of course, OTA has their Capitol Hill event, their Organic Week, which is coming up in May. And I think that anybody in the hemp industry who wants to work in that political realm, especially, might want to join the OTA Fiber Council.
Okay.
And that's one way to connect with them. You can join ota.com.
Yeah.
Look into that.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Like I said, I love Karen, and we talk all the time about the Organic Trade Association. There's actually another young lady up in Washington that's in onions and irrigation. She's won my heart over. She's an awesome farmer. Anyways, long story short, also involved in organic trade. So it's something that works real close, and we're constantly intermingling conversations, and so ways that we can support each other. Talk to me again, or let's remind people real quick, how do people get involved with GOTS? Is there an email? Is there a website that you recommend driving people to?
Well, our website is global-standard.org. And we have a quarterly newsletter. You can sign up for our newsletter. That's one way to get involved. And of course, you can buy GOTS certified clothing and bedding. Next time you need a mattress, next time you need something, consider buying a GOTS certified one. And that's supporting the work of all of us, but more importantly, of taking care of the planet and every supply chain step and all the workers.
Yes, the people that are involved, right? It really goes back to this core value, the foundation of what's going to get us successful or make us successful long term. Well, Laura, I appreciate everything. I appreciate you coming on. I'd love to continue this. If there's anything we can do as far as the hemp sector, there, like you said, there's a lot of things happening. We've got a lot of members that have got phenomenal technology that we're starting to see scale. And so I'd love to, drive the conversation and the connections. And so if there's, anything that comes up, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to support you.
Oh, thank you. Good. This has been a really great conversation. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking your time. I apologize again about StreamYard. Sometimes it connects, and that sometimes
it just didn't connect. And 5 times and we bailed. So that was.
So this is it. Well, I will be sure to share this. For those that don't know, all of our interviews are recorded and shared on our YouTube, multiple podcast channels. You can find them under Moving Forward with Mandy Kerr or Global Hemp Association. The goal really, like I said, is to connect and drive relationships so that we can move the supply chain and really raise the standards. And so I'm excited about this conversation. If you need anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out. All of our future events and interviews are listed on our globalhempassociation.org website under the events tab. So other than that, Lori, thank you so much. I will be sure to share this with Karen because I know she'll be disappointed she missed it, but thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And say hi to Karen. I know her as well.
I will for sure. Talk soon.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.